certainly there's some financial issue, but we see the same disconnects every month. And a lot of them will eventually come in and pay, but it's just almost a behavioral issue than anything. Now you can say, well, it's still not improving anything, but it's still requiring work every month to send that out to the same customer. I'd say a good percentage of our disconnects are the same people over and over and over.
I think that's just the nature of running a utility office.
And part of this is
I do the same thing in my business.
In the morning we have 150
people,
people, and by the time we actually go out to shut off, that number's been dwindled down to 80 because people are coming in and wanting to pay right then that morning.
Yeah, let's try to incentivize that.
We do offer, if people will come in and pay their balance in full instead of only just their past due balance, if they will actually pay their account balance in full, if they were disconnected, we will waive their $50 reconnect fee, you know, as an incentive to pay up and get them ahead. We oftentimes will, we ran a program a while ago where we said if you'll go on budget billing, if you'll let us annualize your bills for you to help stabilize your payments so you'll know every month this is the amount of money you need to set aside. You know, if they would take advantage of that plan, then we offered to waive their fee that month. So we do try to offer different incentives to help people give them an opportunity to get off the list. It's up to them to stay off of it. And I know that at times, you know, people like this is that they can't, that this is their only option. However, out of that list, at the end of the day, generally there's less than a dozen people who are still off. So that means in that one day, they were able to manage to come up with the money to pay their bill at that point. We just are encouraging them to come up with it one day sooner.
It's hard though, because I remember one time I ran into a gentleman that I knew who was assisting somebody else with the utility payment, and you know, it was frustrating for him to spend the money not only on the utility but also on the penalty.
Well, let me tell you another challenge you're going to have, and that's when you get your write-offs. Because that is directly going to all the rest of the consumers, and so any kind of offset that helps that. So if you're a good rate payer, guess what? You're going to pick up all this, not these penalties, but their actual usage that is now that we had to pay for, that they are not paying for, and so it all becomes kind of part of that whole pot to try to make it so that the impact upon the good paying customer is hit as minimal as possible.
We do have a good working relationship with the HEAT program, where we try to help, you know, refer people over to that who, you know, if they meet the requirements in terms of income needs, then, you know, it's an annual system that they can apply for where HEAT will give them money to help offset the cost of their heating bills.
You know, at my office, we operate a little bit like utility, just with the insurance premiums that we collect. And we find that if we set them up on automatic withdrawals for payments, or full pay for a certain period of time, that we have much less service work. Does the utility, I'm really not that familiar with utility, do we do things like that that can really minimize the service work on the back?
We do, and so the work that we did specifically with our customers who are on the shut-off list, this program that we pushed, and I think Kelly, he's gone, but I think we pushed it for about 3 months as our trial. And what we tried to do is, and they attached a separate notice to every door that they knocked on to go out for disconnect that day. And what we did was said, if you will we'll equal out your payments for you, so you say pay the same amount every month, and we're going to sign you up for auto pay, so your payment will automatically come to us. You know how much it's going to be. It's not going to change month over month where you have to worry about that. And then for that month, you know, we waived their $50 reconnect fee for them to sign up for that.
Do they just reconcile
worked for the first
year-end
month
or something?
I'm sorry?
If they don't pay enough, do they just reconcile?
So so then in January of every year is when we go back and recalculate and look and see if there's any adjustments formally. They look at it about quarterly to kind of make sure everybody's on track. And if you're a budget billing customer, you can still show up on the list, meaning if you have a payment and your budget billing is supposed to be $100 a month and you only paid $75, that's going to become a past due balance. And at that time, we look at their running account balance. If they have a credit, we tell them we have to pull them off budget billing, or they need to pay up to stay on it. If they have an amount owing, then they have to go off budget billing and pay up their account balance before they could go back on. But so in that particular program, what we found is there was a lot of people who were interested in it. We worked with them, we got them set up. Probably about 75% of them the second month though defaulted, meaning that when that auto pay came through,
just don't have
they
the
didn't have the
skills
money to pay it, and it got returned back to their account. So, I mean, we're certainly open to any suggestions you think that we could do to try and to help people.
Well, and like Roger said, a lot of it's just behaviors, just patterns that they operate within, and those things don't always
Right.
change.
Yeah, to me, I was thinking about those people who just routinely carry a balance on their credit cards.
There's a certain mentality.
And they've been hit with 23% interest for years and they still carry it. So I don't know how you do it.
We are looking at options to where we can use what we have left with our Code Red program to do automated phone calls that would come 3 or 4 days in advance as an additional reminder to say, you know, your account's past due, to try to get people, you know, as much more warning. You know, we send it out in their bill so that they know it, but we aren't able to call you know, as an individual staff member right now. I don't have the staff that can call everybody on the list. So we're looking at this automated system that we have that'll be available to us through October, that we might be able to put calls out to help notify people, and maybe that will help bring in more payments as well. So.
Well, and I think we all know Aaron's very sensitive to these issues too, and he probably knows, were a lot of these recommendations done by you and him in
This was,
conjunction, or?
yes. So Aaron did the calculations, and we sat down and met on it. And as we go down the list, that's one of the things that you'll see is we weren't just looking at, well, where can we make more? This wasn't about making money.
Yeah,
This
with
wasn't
him
about
out,
fees. And, you know, as you can see, the proposal was, we felt that we needed to reduce the new account setup fee. We felt that we could reduce the connection fee on those new customers as a proposal. We feel that we can actually reduce, you know, the utility deposit if you're south of the river and you don't have power on it. And so, you know, coming with these rate changes, it was never in mind an intention to say where can we get an additional revenue source. It was really an analysis to determine where we felt the costs were needed and what
With
we should
regards
do
to the
for that.
deposit too, the deposit program, it's bothersome to the customer, but I'll tell you, it's been one of the things that's saved our keister through this economy.
You know, I was going to ask that, because when you mentioned that, you know, how much money we lose and the other ratepayers have to pick that up, but if really they have that deposit in there, and how often does the residential bill exceed their deposit if we shut them off in 1 month?
Well, because of the delay and how the billing works. You're really, what, 2 months?
So when you get your bill, so if your bill comes out in the 1st of March, you are actually paying for your consumption that was between January 1st and February 1st. Okay, so you get it in March, it's due on the 20th, we don't shut you off till April. So in April, we're shutting you off for your January usage. So by that time, really, somebody who was going to choose to just skip out and leave, in most instances, that $300 will not cover that cost.
You know, an average utility bill up here north of the river, when you add in electricity, $300 is not uncommon for that to be your utilities in the summer, especially with air conditioning, could be well over that.
Close to that.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, so it covers everything: water, sewer, power, garbage, stormwater, and all your base fees. So, so with that in mind, we would like to request that we reduce the water deposit. So this would be for water-only accounts or accounts that are south of the river, to where their utility deposit we feel would be adequate at only $150. And then if the north side, or if you're a power customer, because if you're north of the river but yet you still have an account that only has water meters, then you'd pay only the $150. But if you have a water and power service, then the deposit that would be required would be $300 for residential. But what we're proposing to help offset that for the customers is that when they first come in to sign up for services, they'd only have to pay $150 when they sign up. And then the next $150 for them would be billed out on their first bill. And our reason behind that is because of the billing where we talked about it coming a month behind. Their first bill, they get a $5 setup fee or a $25 connection charge, but there's no charges the first month that they're there. And so it would allow them to be able to only have to put up $150 up front. Their first bill then would be the $150 to pay for the remainder of their deposit. If for some reason they don't pay it and we shut their service off, we're only out then the 1 month, and the existing $150 should cover the cost for that. So we were just looking for a way that might help those people coming in. It is already challenging, you know, you pay your first month's rent, a deposit for that, you know, sometimes they have their last month, and to have $300 on top of us. And then if you lived out south of the river, you had a deposit for Dixie Escalante as well. And so it has been a challenge, you know, for our residents.
But did I read this letter of credit waives
Yes. So if they can bring in a letter of credit from an existing utility provider showing their last 12 months history, then we will waive their utility deposit.
That's cool.
So our previous policy was that they had to have a history with Washington City, and that was the only time that it was waived. But we have felt that, you know, anyone who's coming from any other city, their records, you know, as long as it comes from the utility provider directly, should be sufficient to kind of show
And just
their
so you know,
standing.
St. George City, of course, who we have a lot of them, if you're late twice, they will not issue
Right.
a letter of credit.
That's cool.
And then the customer also
So
has
they work well with us.
the option after they've been with us for 1 year. If they have maintained 12 months of good history with us, they can request their deposit to be refunded at that time, and we would apply it onto their account. And it doesn't have to be held for the life of their utility account. So
They have to
can
request it, or does it
They
just?
have to. We don't do it automatically. They have to request it.
So
Otherwise, we
do
just hold it
we-
until they leave.
Do we make that known to them? or
Yep, it's
not?
on the. We talk to them when they sign up for services, and it's also listed on the
Better make our request.
application.
I wonder.
Did we talk about the business one?
Yeah, can we talk about the business one? Commercial.
Yes.
Do we have anything that separates a small commercial from a large
We don't.
commercial?
Not yet.
Because
Yes.
one of the
Right
things we
now.
look at is there's small businesses out there that maybe use less than my house.
Right.
And for them to pay $500, that's a lot for a small business to
I guess
put
Well,
on.
what
The
I'd
challenge
recommend
for
is that our
that-
large commercial get pushed up, because our large commercial is where we just take a
$500
bath.
won't, and there's
Um,
only a few of those. Typically, if you have a big business that comes in, we don't have default issues. It is more of the mom and pops, the ones that are trying to start up and that struggle, and sometimes you have turnovers that constantly happen at specific locations. But the challenge with the commercial business is that we could try to work through if we were gonna come up with something in terms of a large and a small, is you could have somebody like even Washington City, our Parks Department, their usage when they turn the lights on at the ball field is about $35. But when they turn the lights on, they have a demand charge
Tell us about
that
it.
is, you know, so this would be that instant where you talked about. So you could be a small business who doesn't do a lot and in certain instances have large utility bills. So how do we felt $500 was really more in line with what an average, you know, more smaller business would use in consumption. I mean, if you're talking, what is a large business to you? I mean, a large business.
Well, we already have those defined
Can't you give
on
a-
the power, in the
Right.
power company. There's a list of, I
Right,
have a
large
list of
commercial and
them
small
of small commercials, so
So
I
I mean, I
would
could go
try
back
to
and show
redefine
you
it.
like an average utility bill for someone who's on the small commercial rate.
Can you give them the same stagger?
Where we could say you know, pay
Where
half
they
up front and pay
upfront
half
and
on their
half on
first
their
billing.
bill?
We could do
Because that would at
that.
least give them a month's worth of
Mhm.
trying to get some business generated.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm assuming their billing structure is the same as anybody else, the first month's bill.
It is, yes, the same. Yep, so we could break that out for them. And if you want us to look into it, I'm fairly positive, though, that the average small commercial utility bill is gonna be around it's gonna be more than $250, and you have to remember they're gonna be 2 months behind on their billing.
Right.
So, $500 for somebody who
What's
couldn't
the
pay,
average,
that
what's
got
the
turned
average
off.
residential?
Oh,
Water and power.
water and power, depending on the time of the year,
Easily that,
Is-
probably.
yeah.
Yeah, so why wouldn't you, I would just almost, my recommendation would be that we couple small commercial with residential, and that we don't try to redefine it, but only define it the way it's already on the books between commercial and small commercial. But the rate for small commercial is commensurate with the residential
Well,
rate.
you're saying that small commercial is using a whole lot more usage, though.
Well,
That's what she's
on-
saying.
Yes.
Well,
They're
the
not
man,
equivalent on the residential. They're not
So
equivalent
I guess
on
what
their
I'd like to
usage
do
with
first,
residential.
rather than have that would be, is why don't we poll our small commercial customers?
Yeah.
And I'd like to look at an average
good.
rate.
and I'd like to see an
You know,
average
to
rated
see an
residential
average
too, because
building.
if we're saying that the
You know, an
deposit is
average-
substantiated by the potential loss
Right,
because of the billing in arrears, then they ought to both be
So
accurate.
you're suggesting that maybe we push the residential up then?
Yeah, it sounds like you have to do that 2 or 3 times.
If it were, hey, look, for me,
Let's just, if you could have, you and Aaron
We
maybe
can.
could take a look at that and maybe,
Do we offer letters?
well,
See
I'm
if
just
we
saying
can-
the logic ought to go both ways for small commercial as it does for residential.
We
Let's
have
just
not
let's
offered a
see if we
letter
can
of
take a
credit on
look
our
at it.
commercial businesses.
Letter of credit waivers to commercial?
We have not offered that.
To me, I think that could, both of those offers could become, we could become more business friendly. Because there's businesses that are just moving from one place to another that could get a letter of credit as well. And that would, if that helps them, I'm open to doing that.
That's true.
Especially if it's a business that's not a startup, they've been operating somewhere.
yeah,
Yeah,
that'd be great.
okay.
Wonderful.
On the collections,
Oh, yes. So,
30% is what we used to pay the agent. We
so,
just- our
well,
agreement was-
30% is what we had put on there, what we thought we were paying the agent, but it was 35. So we had left it at that. And rather than to try to come back, you know, every time, and I believe Carrie Wheelwright is looking at our agents right now that we have doing our collections. And I believe they're looking at a possibility of having more than one agent that would look at our collections. It helps them want to be competitive at actually collecting for us when you have more than one that receives the business. But what we want to do is just pass on that fee, whatever that percentage fee is. So if you want, whenever he goes out to bid and gets those contracts, we would bring it back and we could match it. Or I was trying to come up with the language that would just say, whatever that percent is what we would pass on.
I like how you did it.
I think that's
So.
perfect.
Well, the other thing with the different agents too is some agents can't function in other states. We have actually
Right.
problems with Utah and Arizona. Sometimes I have to pick up an Arizona agent and a Utah agent. They can't be the same.
Okay.
I don't know how that all works, but that's just the way it is.
Does commercial also get their deposit refunded?
Yes, all of the deposits are refunded, and there are, refunded meaning that they'll be applied to their account balance to pay off anything that's owing first, and then the difference would be refunded to them. But there's never a forfeit of your deposit other than to pay for your services. So. Cool. And then I'm going to have Mike Shaw. He's going to take just a few minutes to talk.
Can I ask one question? As you were talking about disconnects and different things like that, the issues that we have is there a way to stagger those at all?
We do, we stagger, I believe we just started staggering again, water and power, because we actually have, if you're south of the river for water, we have to do disconnects for those as well, and we used to do them all
On
the same day.
And now you
And we
stagger
stagger
those?
it. The only time we stagger now with power is if the list is so large that we can't accomplish it in a single day.
Okay.
Now, one of the things we are looking at, and it's been looked at for a while now, is the staggering of the billing cycles.
Right.
Yeah.
So different parts of the city will actually have different billing cycles, and that should kind of levelize. We're hoping that will levelize workloads and other things. But we've kind of just got to that, and Aaron's doing some good work with that.
Some of the fun stuff with growing, huh?
Yes.
Cool.
Yes. So Mike's going to talk a little bit on water and sewer.
Now, see, if you look overall, that was pretty darn good news, really.
Yeah.
I don't know if council remembers when the audit came through, our water department, we're starting the little graph showing our revenues and expenses. We've kind of hit a line here, and if we keep going, our expenses are going to start exceeding our revenues. One thing that we have done that the other cities did not adopt to do is when we got the district surcharge, which is the $2 a month fee that we pay the district for part of our regional water that we get, we opted to cover that fee in our existing collections. St. George, Santa Clara, Ivans, who's all part of the regional water, they actually pass that on. It's part of the utility billing. It's labeled right on their utility billing, district surcharge, $2. So what we've looked at is we could probably offset this loss that we're starting to get into by just passing that district charge right on.
That's what it is. I mean,
It is.
Well, and I remember the council who, when you presented this, said that if there was a time, because of increasing costs and other things, if there is a time that we need to do that, that's how we would recommend it go.
Yeah, other than that, we are going to have to look at a rate increase. And
What are we gonna do when the district is just tearing us apart? because they've
We'll
got us
just
all locked
say
in.
we knew it was gonna happen, and I don't know.
Say we saw it coming?
Water's kind of like the power industry. The cheap water's gone. You know, we didn't have a whole lot of option for water for the future, so. You know, we pump as much as the water out of our wells as possible, and we tried drilling wells. We drilled 2 wells with the real hopes that we were gonna get around 800 gallons a minute. We got 125, so.
I think there's some real risk. You've heard me talk about this before. We put up the good fight, I think, on some of that agreement, and at the end of the day, we were knuckled under.
My concern is there's not real good representation at the district, and so this fee could double, could triple, and
Could.
we're gonna be.
You've got that surcharge issue in the regional water supply agreement that we fought adamantly that it get capped, and they would not do it.
Exactly, and
I
so.
mean, and by the way, one of the people who finally joined forces with Washington City before we were done in looking at that agreement was then Mayor Denny Drake, who now is the county commissioner that oversees all of that stuff. Denny and Mayor Drake, when he was in there, I still remember being in the public meetings when he's up there saying, you know what, this doesn't make sense. How do you justify passing this along? Can you show me where you get these costs broken down from? So he went in there very vocal against it, and now he's one of the 3 people who just says, yeah, we have a lot of good candidates to be on that board, but guess what? We're just gonna take the recommendation of the district manager and approve all the 7 that are already there.
But never even applied.
Yeah.
Right.
So I have quite an interest in the water district and what they do, and I've watched this discussion about the Lake Powell water line, and the real question is, how do we pay for new water? And if you ask anybody out there that's honest, one of the things you start to do is you regulate water usage through rates and through fees. And so I know it's coming. It's going to be here someday when water gets very expensive.
Well, we were the very first entity down here to actually do a staggered rate to try to encourage water conservation by trying to hit the higher end user with a higher rate.
Yeah.
And then we were also the first ones to actually adopt a time of day watering ordinance.
I think one of the challenges the districts have, and we were always a little bit.
But isn't it, sorry,
No, you go ahead.
isn't it the case that essentially our rate's going to be what the district charges us because of the way we're set up, right? In other words, our water rate doesn't have a lot of local influence because we buy it all out of their pipeline.
Well, we don't buy all.
But it's getting less and less.
Less and less
Right.
as our growth goes on. We buy more and more, but the other thing is the more we buy from the district, the cheaper our water becomes. It's a lot like the power. If we got a base load on that treatment plant, the more we can use over that base loading, the cheaper the water costs are. So we actually just got a rebate check back from the Conservancy District for
95,000,
yeah,
65,000. I got the
$65,000.
letter, 65,000.
So that was a rebate back from what our base that we had set was. That was kind of our rebate back on that water.
One of the challenges I have with kind of the position that the district is in, and I'm not really arguing the point of for or against the Lake Powell pipeline. I actually could probably feel comfortable arguing both sides at any given moment on the topic, but I think that they've created an interesting dilemma with the collection of these impact fees. I mean, because there's no way you can be partially pregnant in this issue. And I think they've collected all these fees over the year, and I think they're almost compelled to move forward, because how do you even begin when that's part of the intention of why you collected it in the first place? How do you begin to disperse that back?
Well, they've gone through different iterations of changing impact fee laws based on how that was used. Remember, if you remember last year, they went to the legislature to get the funding, get some of that matching funding, some of that Utah funding for the pipeline, and they turned them down last year. And the response was basically, we're just getting them warmed up. We're going to come back. Because I talked to a couple of the people that work there.
Yeah.
We'll be back when, finances look better. We'll come up again when we're really hard pressed for coming up with new avenues to have water, as opposed to coming up with a great system of, really encouraging less use, more effective, more efficient use. So
I think I'm okay with putting that fee through. I don't
Well-
like where I think we're headed, but I don't think I have any control over that either.
Well, I gave you the bad news. Now the good news is that we're actually, when you start looking at these capital projects and looking at the sewer department revenue, we're actually going to do a rate study, because I really see we can do a rate decrease in the sewer department.
A rate decrease or an impact fee decrease?
Rate. lower our user rate, monthly rate.
Is that like the, what you would call the fee that's on each bill, is that the same thing, or?
Yeah, the monthly bill that you get for your sewer.
Isn't there also a fee, like a fee?
It's not a usage thing, it's
Oh,
just a flat.
It's
fee.
just a flat fee
It's just
Oh,
on the
okay.
sewer.
So the sewer fee, the sewer rate, that's the same
Yeah,
thing?
see, we just recently reduced the treatment end because St. George actually had reduced their end.
Right, through that contract.
And we have the treatment and the collection on your utility bill. The collection end is what we use, and it looks like we can reduce that amount. I don't know how much, but that's what our rate study will do.
So Mike, one question I have, you said that the water, that we're running into issues, but as I look at these projections, our revenues, our balance, our unrestricted balance is increasing every year by over $1 million as we look at these. Does that have that $2 increase in there, or are these numbers based before that $2?
That would already have been looking at our operating revenue. But I don't know if you remember when our auditors were here and they did our financial presentation for us, there was one graph in particular that Roger had me look at when I came back, and that was the one for the water department. And what you saw was a reduction between the operating revenues and expenses, that margin that you would see, to where basically at this, at that point, that was lost. And the direct correlation was from the time we started paying the district fees in terms of our water surcharges, that was when we started to see the reduction, because it was something that we completely absorbed, those costs associated with that. So on the cash flow worksheet then, you're looking at retained earnings, obviously, that we already have, but let me see.
In 2014 it drops, but there's a $2.5 million for the booster station.
And again,
And
for
then
the
from
water
there it starts
department-
increasing by, from 14 to 15, that's almost $2 million. That's $1.7 million.
It is on here, and this is where your depreciation's gonna come into play. So, and the depreciation would have been factored in, and you would have seen that in the charts that were represented during
Okay.
the financial statement.
Okay.
But the water department has over $1 million of depreciated costs
Okay.
each year that hit them. And
Okay.
that was one of the main reasons when we had our meeting earlier today, we talked about wanting to throw that in as a line item so that you could see that, so.
So when I hear depreciation, sometimes I'm thinking more expenses associated with the
So-
assets that we have that will be coming through the operational
Right, so what it is
budget.
it's,
Repairing water lines,
when
different things like that.
when we record an asset, we record it at the cost it was to purchase. So it's not the value, like a market value or anything like that. It's the actual cost it was for us to either build that water tank or put in those water lines. And then depending on the amount of life that is estimated for that, then it's depreciated each year for that service, with the understanding that at some point, we're gonna have to go in and do some maintenance and repair and replace those lines and equipment. So it's not just the system, but it would be any equipment in the water department, their vehicles, their buildings, their.
But the depreciation isn't gonna match up exactly with the cost to maintain
Correct.
or repair, so.
Correct.
We
Yes,
usually
because,
do.
we're just
because you're
looking
depreciating,
on the
you're
depreciation.
depreciating the original cost. So
Right.
obviously you have inflation over time, something that cost me, and most of when you're talking system for the water department, it's depreciated out over almost 50 years.
Yeah.
So the cost to put it in 50 years ago is not going to be the cost to
Yeah.
replace it, in the future, so.
Good example is we did the in-town replacement of the water lines, and you can see on their sheet there, the water revenue bond from 2006, 2008, so that's 100% non-impact eligible, because that was more or less our funded depreciation had to borrow money to replace those lines, just because they had to get their useful life.
Yeah.
And we've had to replace a couple of water tanks, the old steel tank, the old bladder tank. We could not use impact fee funds for those because they were
It's-
steel infrastructure.
Yeah. So it could be more than the depreciated amount, in some cases a lot more.
Oh, you bet. Yeah, because I think our in-town replacement ended up $9 million.
Yeah.
So we carried that over a 40-year loan.
Take a deep breath. Go do some yoga and some Zen. That's why you're elected, is to make these decisions. Anything else to discuss?
I don't know if it's not on the agenda, and I don't know if this is the right place to talk about it, but I am curious as to the progress on the fire department. If that's not the time to talk about it, that's
Well,
fine too.
Denise is not here. I think it's,
Hi Denise.
we closed on both positions, both for the Safer Grant positions and the chief position on Friday at 5. There's probably sitting on my desk about 90 applications between the two positions. It's about 15 chief applications, all the rest firefighters. We're in the process of reviewing those right now, and we'll set up appointments. Right now, the schedule is we'll probably start the chief interviews next week. You can usually anticipate at least 2 rounds of interviews. Next Wednesday will be the testing, the written testing for the firefighters, and next Saturday, so a week from this Saturday, will be physical testing for the firefighter pool with interviews beginning the following week on that.
Is Chief Stoker gonna participate in those interviews for the chief?
We don't know who, and part of the reason for that is because there are several St. George firefighters that are applying, and we're trying to figure out how the best to approach that. Not so much from Chief Stoker, because we have great confidence in him, but how awkward.
Objective.
Well, not even objective. I really have a great confidence in Chief Stoker. My concern is how awkward the applicants.
Having their current job, their current boss interviewing them for a new job.
That's more of my concern. And so we might pull down like Chief Irons from Cedar City. Good
Is there any
chief.
Cedar applicants, firefighters from Cedar City?
I don't know on that, on the
Or
firefighter.
for chief?
There's no chief, I don't think so. I may be mistaken on that. There could be one, I don't know. But I didn't think so, but what we're trying to do is pick, and we will pick professionals, and we're trying to pick professionals that won't create an awkward situation for either the applicant or themselves. And it's very difficult if you excuse them, because they're trying to make comparative decisions, and you excuse them for even 4 or 5 interviews and then bring them in. It's difficult for them to help.
Makes sense.
So that's.
Just the appearance, I mean, problematic in the public is the appearance. If they
I would feel way uncomfortable
really gotta think
if
about
my
that.
current boss was sitting on the interview board for my next job.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that would be incredibly awkward.
I have great confidence in Stoker. Matter of fact, I was quite excited to use him, but when I saw the number of applicants, I realized that it was from the applicant's point of view that I started to.
Well, I know he pushed a lot of his people to apply.
He absolutely did.
Yeah,
Well,
he's been
and-
supportive of it.
And if he didn't, it shouldn't be awkward for the people then, if he pushed them to apply.
He felt like it was a good opportunity for him, so.
I think more,
And they've
he
got a good
pushed
model over
more
there.
of his people towards safer.
Then the chief?
Yeah. His email that went out was saying, you know, we know Washington has these safer grants. I encourage you all to apply who want the full-time. Now recognize, he had a couple purposes for his email. One was to say, I encourage you to apply for those full-time positions. He was not talking about the chief at all. But also recognize if you take a part-time position, the policy of St. George does not allow you to work for St. George part-time and then part-time. So just remember that. That was his point on his email.
Have you had a chance to see whether we've got some strong applicants?
I've looked over quickly the chiefs because it was only that big. Honestly, this pile is this big on my desk. The chief, we got outstanding applicants on the chief's side. We've got a few local. I think, I don't know if I told Councilman Sigma,
None from
nobody
Richfield.
from Richfield.
Nobody from Richfield.
If you remember that comment.
And the timeline's over?
Timeline's over, and we only did a 2-week. We thought if we didn't have the necessary pool, we would extend it, but there's absolutely no reason we needed to extend it. We've got them from North Ogden, I'm talking about the chief, North Ogden, Roy, Murray. I think there's some from the Utah County area.
Guess
Very
I'd
strong.
Be glad it's not Clark County. I heard they had over 20,000 applications for a limited number of firefighter positions.
Wow.
I believe that.
Wow.
Yeah, this was pretty, and I think, I know that the HR has said that the firefighter applications are just very, very strong as well, all the way across the board. Both our in-house and out-of-house are very, very strong.
So what was put out specifically? So chief?
Just chief and firefighter, and then the captain will be posted when the chief comes on, so he can have his opportunity to make that selection.
So how many of the firefighter positions were there?
We have 3 full-time, 2 part-time, but how we posted is a firefighter, and then as we interview, we will ask them, are you interested in a part-time if you're not offered a full-time? And that's how we'll go through that route. So we didn't post like 3 full-times and a bunch of part-times. So we'll fill them from those pools. But we'll go through the testing first, because there'll be some that'll probably wash out through the testing process. So we're in good shape. As a matter of fact, I think timeline, we're in very good shape. Things are moving along very quickly.
And the chief has been excused from the chief position, correct? That's occurred. And so
Yeah,
we're
all
in
the
our-
changes have
we're in our
occurred.
interim
Yeah.
management phase right now.
Yeah, all the changes have occurred. I'm visiting with them weekly. They're all doing well. We had a structure fire the other night, our first one, and it went exceptionally well with all the personnel, as well as the backup by St. George City.
But you lost the structure. Is this
Well,
done on Kirk?
Yeah, I'm not sure we had any hope of saving that thing either. Didn't matter who, it was a trailer. I'm not sure we'd have had any hope on that anyway, but the department did a fantastic job. Chief Stoker actually came over as well, gave us great report. So, anyway.
He got arrested. That's what I was thinking.
All right, gentlemen, we'll move on to item 8, adjournment. Anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Go ahead.
You're too slow. I'll make the motion that we adjourn.
Second.
Trim and I.
Daily,
Ron's the only one that wants